Good morning. Good morning.
Good to see you this morning.
It is a good morning.
It is a good morning. So today we have entitled this podcast, The Battle for Silicone Valley.
Oh, that sounds good.
Titans.
In a world.
Or is Silicon Valley trying to kill?
Facebook.
Yeah.
How did like Madison Avenue become Silicon? Like the ad business just shifted to Silicon. Everything's shifted to Silicon Valley. Have
Actually,
you been out?
everything has, yeah.
The real estate's incredibly expensive in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I know. That's why people are moving here.
Yeah.
Don't move here.
It's a beautiful place.
Don't move here.
Go to Austin.
Let's go over the hill and go
Not
to the
that we
beach.
don't want you. It's just that we don't want to be crowded over here in beautiful
Yeah.
Franklin, Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So seriously, Ken, you and I were talking before the podcast recording this morning about this topic, and you said something that just kind of shocked me out of my my serious thoughts that I was having. And you said, "Isn't it ridiculous that we're sitting here talking about it's Facebook?"
Yeah, I know. It's an online social network.
Yeah, that was made for college kids to like check each other out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is odd, isn't it?
It feels really weird to me. And then when you get into some of the details that we get into, it's like, world leaders being involved in the approval or disapproval of bans and stuff like that. It's like, this is Facebook.
Yes.
We're all aware of that, right?
Yeah.
I realize the power. I just think it's funny.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that we unpack it a little bit today because it is such a central tool that so many agencies use for their clients, because it we can joke about it, but it does have power to target, to advertise, and it's become a habit in the zeitgeist of our culture. It's like everyone, a lot of people do it.
For sure. And I mean, we've discussed like some of the changes that are happening in previous podcasts recently, because there are a lot of changes in Facebook, obviously, that pertain to how you market. But today, it just keeps getting worse. Like, I mean, not worse, but there just keeps more and more comes out. Now Google's come out and kind of gone for privacy. It sounds like, which I think is going to change how we do ads and market on Google. But what's interesting about it is it seems like you've got Facebook that's fighting for, tracking so that you can advertise the way it's been done. And it seems like everyone else, including Google, who is not for privacy, by the way, they're almost, looks like they've pitted against Facebook now too. And so I wonder, is Silicon Valley trying to kill Facebook?
Yeah, Google came out not too long ago and said that, and kind of quietly under the radar, they haven't made a big deal about it. I think it'll become more and more public as people figure it out, that they're no longer going to support third-party cookies or tracking, which means we're not going to allow Facebook's tracking. We're not going to allow anyone's tracking but our own.
And if I'm not mistaken, they also said they're not going to do their own tracking.
That's right.
Individually.
Yeah. So what does that mean for remarketing and retargeting on Google? Yet to be determined, but it seems to be a blow against platforms like Facebook. And then, of course, Apple coming out with their iOS 14 privacy permissions, which affected how Facebook uses ads and uses other domains if you're advertising for certain clients, et cetera. So it's interesting to see how that will affect Facebook long term. Brad, do you have any thoughts?
The giants have come out of their caves, and now they're putting the pressure on the little guy, Facebook.
On the new guy.
Yeah, I thought Facebook was the big guy, but now we all know Facebook is not the big guy. It's the little guy.
It's the big kid.
It's the big kid. It's funny. I had an opportunity.
And that's not a knock.
I had an opportunity to take a private tour of Facebook campus, and when I came out of it, I was. I felt like it was like
later.
I know. I felt like it was a bunch of college kids like hanging out and like what college kids would do, right? Like think of Disneyland and with a lot of college kids, and man, it's quite a facility there. But I walked out there going, wow, this is a big machine. Like this is a big machine, and just thought, I remember the day when we used to call it the Facebook, not just Facebook, the Facebook.
Yeah, it was called the Facebook.
The Facebook.
Yeah, historically, just to give a little context, that's an interesting point, Brad, that you make. because Mark Zuckerberg, if you've seen The Social Network or, even know any of the history, he cobbled this together in using source code. He was a hacker in college and cobbled it together, and it kind of took off. He made it for his college, and then then you had to be had to have a college email to even get on. It wasn't open to everyone.
Yep.
And so it was made with open source. And in a sense, he never left that. Like, he's still at the helm. He's still doing it. And like you said, it's just thousands and tens of thousands of, like you said, it feels like college students keeping this thing alive.
I think it was, he started the business perpetrating on humanity, on really women, right? Mm. And he's still perpetrating on humans, right, with our data.
It is challenging, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because, they always say, you are the product on Facebook. But I think the future is going to change quite a bit. And I think that there's going to be things that where we ourselves own our own privacy, either on the blockchain or something, and we lease it out to whoever we want to participate on their platform. So we don't give it out to everyone. We give it out to only those that we feel that we want to participate. So if Facebook says, hey, the only way to participate is to allow us to get access to this specific information and track you, then we do that. And it's not owned by a phone, your phone or an iOS or Android or Google. It's owned by you.
Yeah, I saw, it was an interesting quote from someone. It was someone at Google in the article I read recently where they were talking about them kind of locking down the privacy. And they said something that I thought was profound and true, which is people shouldn't have to give up their privacy to get relevant advertising. And that's kind of where it is right now, right? It's like you can either accept, all, and when you can choose, you can accept to be tracked everywhere so that you can get better ads.
Yes.
And we're in the ad business. I get it, like, both sides, but that kind of feels a little like I have to do that just to get some relevant advertising.
Yeah.
And why would I do that? No one really would do that, which is why we're having this conversation, which is why these things are happening. Because as people get aware of it, they're like, no, I don't care if I get relevant ads. In fact, most people don't want ads, right? And they don't realize that relevant ads to them actually mean, a better experience in general, right? And it does. But the trade-off isn't there. And it's yeah.
Well, YouTube has gone to the model of you can pay to eliminate ads and things, to have a different experience. You're wondering if Facebook will get to that point where you actually will pay to enjoy Facebook, even though I don't really enjoy Facebook.
You'll pay to be depressed?
Yes, to read about.
You'll pay to feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, where, the experience is different and you hide the privacy.
Yeah.
But the challenge is that I don't like anyone dictating my privacy, whether it's Apple or Google. I don't like them. I don't want to just, the challenge is when you get a new phone, let's just say, the privacy on there is set to the default settings. And there's different settings that you can do, but nobody knows how to do those. And they become more and more in depth, right? And, and then they dictate exactly what your privacy is. Now, Apple does, I think, of most companies, seems to have a concern with privacy. They've been talking about it for years. It's not something that they just like Google, like, oh, by the way, we're going to now care about this, right? It seems like they've cared about it for a long time. They started with iMessage and how the iMessage and the iCloud was really locked down and it's completely, what's it called, encrypted, and your messages can't even be read if they're found, if they're hacked or something. And so, anyways,
yeah, I've watched Apple. That's one of the reasons why I like Apple. And look, who knows really what's happening anywhere, but publicly they're for privacy, right? And that's kind of like the best that you can get right now. And I think a lot of people would agree that that's what they're for. I do believe that, so Apple has end-to-end encryption, right? So which means basically they can't read the stuff that passes through, which is great. That's really how it should be, right? Like people can't read your mail.
Yeah.
That you get physical mail. So why should people be able to read your text messages and things? But it did come out recently that they wanted to encrypt the backups, the iCloud backups. I know we're getting into tech world here. And I guess the government pressured them and they decided not to do that.
Really? But
So
then,
that's a little concerning.
you hear these stories
and
about
unfortunate.
these people who work for Apple are sitting around with headphones listening to
Listen to us right
listening
now.
to conversations, right? So you see both sides of that, and you wonder why. Like, are they doing that for quality assurance, or are they just doing that just to, like, why?
Well, the reality too is, I'm with you, Ken. I am an Apple fanboy. I even have a sticker on my car. It's pushing it way too far, but at the same time, I do realize that there are probably several flaws. I love the privacy aspect, but one of the things that we live in right now is a voice-activated world. So Siri is always listening to our conversations. Now, we can argue, and no one knows for sure unless you're in the deep. You have high security clearance within Apple, where those reside, what other things are listening. I have heard and read that sometimes if there's something that is threatening, like someone's physically being threatened, Siri can decipher that.
I've heard that too.
Cops can show up. That's a little concerning on one sense, because you said, somebody is monitoring and getting a flag.
You might get interruption on date night.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but this speaks to, I think, a thing that I've been thinking a lot about is when we talk about privacy. I know I have in the past, and I know here in America, I don't know about in other countries, it's always talked about in the context of rights. And in one sense, it is a right. So I don't want my privacy. This is mine. But I think it's important to understand what privacy really is and what it means to us and why it's important. It's deeper than just a right. It goes to really who we are as a species. What does privacy mean? Well, privacy is how we maintain intimacy in relationships. Privacy is how we maintain our creativity. Privacy is how we engage with being a better person, with our own self-awareness. These are all aspects of, like, when I'm private and I'm by myself, or I'm with a group of people or a significant other, or privacy gives me something that can't be ever in any other situation. And it's essential to our livelihood, to our psychology. And if that is somehow taken away or invaded, I would argue that it's deeper than just rights.
Oh, far deeper.
It goes into, if you ever have seen these movies or know someone or read about torture or prison or, a deeply communist environment where those rights are totally, you never have privacy, never, ever have privacy. That's the hell of prison, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know this, you can't even go to the bathroom without someone staring at you.
So I worked with a team in Romania for the last 12 years, and they're great friends. And one of the gentlemen that I work with, he's around 50, and he grew up where 1 out of 5 people that he knew were informants to the government. And that's just the nature of the environment. And, so if you were sitting or chatting with somebody and they thought, well, maybe you said, hey, I didn't pay taxes or something like that, they would go tell and get paid for that, and you'd be arrested or fined or what else, right? And thank goodness that's all changed in the country. But why I was talking to him about the privacy issue, and I said, what do you think about that? And he's like, I just assume they all have my information anyways, because he grew up in that nature where he just assumed everybody knew what he was doing anyways.
Yeah.
And so you keep it kind of quiet to yourself a little bit more. You're more apprehensive to share openly. But he just was like, I just assume they have everything anyway. So because his government is a different now here in the United States, where liberties and freedoms and privacy is more protected, and I think we're not used to being as violated by Siri and as we are,
It is a violation.
We fear that it's being like tracked and sold to like China.
Right.
We have this fear that there's somebody out there as a big bad boogeyman out there that's going to somehow track you and take all your information and somehow do something, nefarious with it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I mean, I think we have to be careful, but I don't know why that is. And, we saw that during even the McCarthy era and stuff like that, where there's this strong fear that either the communist ideal or the communist China is out to get us. And I think it still stays with us. And I think that's part of our culture.
And I know this can be, it's a hot topic these days. And some people are like, look, I have, for 90% of the population, it's like I have nothing special to hide.
That's what most people say, right? Well, I have nothing to hide, so I'm not really worried about it.
It's a slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
Because what privacy gives you, Bob, what you guys are saying is really interesting. And I agree. It is more than a right. It's an intimate human need.
Right.
And it's why in prisons and in and when people are being tortured, privacy is removed, right? Completely. And that there's an aspect of violation. That person's violated. It creates trauma. But at the end of the day, it also, I would argue that privacy is an element of certainty. And when you have privacy, you can be certain of certain things. And when you don't have privacy, there's more uncertainty around you. And right, and human beings need that certainty. And so when everything around you is exposed completely, and you have no safe space, everything's essentially uncertain, and it creates a really anxious world, which is kind of what we're seeing right now. And I would say maybe even when it's happening and people don't realize it's happening, it still has that same effect of anxiety. Because we're seeing that now. And so it's a really big issue, and I think some of these things can be I want to say politicized, but they can be put on certain, some people are for it, some people against it, but it's kind of deeper than that. I think that there's a way to have privacy and still be able to do all the things we've done, because we've done them for hundreds and hundreds of years. And here's the scary thing is, it is a slippery slope. Eventually, like standing up for or protecting your own privacy, even if it's not, in your opinion, valuable, is making sure that just doesn't continue to slip away for everyone, where it just becomes commonplace. And that's what's happened over the last 10, 15 years, right? We just gave it away to private companies, which arguably is probably better than governments, honestly. But we gave it away to private companies. And now we're seeing some of the repercussions. And I'm glad it's happening now, because it could get way worse. And I'll stop there, but it can get way worse than where it is right now. And thank God it's happening inside of private companies, right? And it's not, I mean, it is a worldwide issue, but it's not worldwide government issues. At least on the level that we were aware of, with Facebook and those kind of things.
Now, if you're going to get an ad, would you, going back to the Facebook ads, if you're going to get an ad, would you rather have an ad of something that you're interested in? Would you like to see the latest gravel bike or the...
I do like that, but here's the deal. Like, I think advertisers, come on, guys, like we need to, I mean, guys being everyone, you can create great ads that don't need to be great only if you know what the person ate for breakfast, right? Right. I think it makes it easier for advertisers, and it lets advertisers be lazier. But ultimately, without targeting, people may have made great ads in the past that people want to watch, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'd rather have good advertising than bad advertising. But and I think we all agree on this. But ultimately, we think it has to do with targeting because we've been accustomed to that for the last 10 years, but it really doesn't.
Well, I think Amazon has trained us to think that, and I'm going to speak for myself as a marketer, has trained us as marketers, me specifically here, I can't speak for you guys, to think that the more micro target that we can get, the better conversions we're going to get. And on some level, that is a true statement. The other side of the coin is there are just as many examples of companies that don't micro target, that don't go that deep into people's privacies, that are doing really, really well and successful using other methods, i.e. Netflix,
Yeah,
Netflix, they know what you're watching, right?
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's about creating really good content and telling really good stories. And isn't that's what always has won in advertising? Is that's always won, and it always will be won, because that's how we're wired. Netflix might say, "Hey, I noticed you watch this, so you might like this," but I don't really follow that much. I don't really watch because Netflix said go watch this. I watch because someone said, you've got, a friend of mine, whatever it may be, in the office, or my wife, or whatever, said, you got to watch this. It's so good. It's such a well-written story. It pulled me in, and I really like it. And I think, to me, I look at that and say,
Yeah.
they didn't micro-target me. They didn't collect, where I searched online. They simply said, we've got some really good content and we think you're going to like it, and check it out. And I was pulled in, drawn in by that. I think we need to be thinking more like that.
I think that's, I agree with you partially, but I do believe that it really depends on the products that you're
Yeah, of
marketing.
course.
If you're marketing a soft drink and everyone in the United States is available to drink it, you have a very broad audience. But if you're marketing a specific drug, let's say, and you guys probably do this. You watch these drugs on TV, and they're some type of really unique drug that maybe very few people actually would take, and they're advertising it on American Idol or something like that. That the cost is crazy compared to, it's worth it for them still, but the majority of the audience is not gonna participate in the ad, right? It's not for them. And so, it is, if you do market to a very niche audience, we have a client that we had struggles before Facebook. We did a lot of Google, and as Facebook started to getting more and more able to target different audiences, we found a lot more success on Facebook, a lot. 4 to 6 times the results that we would find with the same spend on Google. And, it was only because of the data that they had that made it, we were able to target like that. And what happens is, once you have it, then it goes away. We've talked about this in the past. That's the struggle.
Right.
It's like, Facebook used to have other ways you could target, and they've removed those during all the political nonsense. And once you have something, you can't take it away. That's what I'm saying about Facebook, because, on Facebook campus, they give away all free food. It's like downtown Disney. Every restaurant is free.
Yeah,
they just want you on campus.
Of course.
And I'm like, well, what's going to happen when they have to cut their budget and they no longer serve free food to their employees, right?
Yeah.
Do you think their employees are going to be happy about that? Think they're going to want to work more for you? No, they're going to want, you give away too much, and then you take it away, and people get disgruntled. And that's sometimes how I feel.
Because you set a new standard, and now we're in, and with advertising, we're in a new standard that it feels like, oh, you can't, once you establish and normalize to that, it feels like you can't live without that standard. Exactly. I mean, that's kind of human nature, right?
Yeah.
And I do think it has effects, right? I do think removing, locking down privacy, removing a lot of the data, let's say it reduces the ability to advertise as efficiently as we can in some of these places. I do think that probably eliminates, that makes it harder for smaller startup businesses and those kind of people that don't have the cash to do big spends. And I do think that has some pulling back. That probably does have some effects there. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's a question of that data actually makes advertising better. I think the question is how you get that data. And is there a way to get that where people, being aware of the decisions they're making, freely give that certain amount of data for the purposes of advertising, or for the purposes of maybe a sample set of advertising that then they get paid for? Like, I mean, we know customer research and those kind of things have happened in the past where people get paid for giving their intimate information. I realize it's not necessarily the same way Facebook works, but it's the same type of information, right? Like, I'll pay you, you tell me everything about yourself, you tell me if you like the product, and then there's some of these focus groups and those kind of things. I mean, I think there's a middle ground where people, and I think there's probably, I believe there are ways that we've established that it kind of works, and it works within certain boundaries, and people are aware of it, and it doesn't get out of hand. I think there's a middle ground that we can go back to. The challenge is that, right now, people aren't aware of the value of their information or even what they're doing, and I think that's what's coming out now. It's basically dishonesty, in inside of some of these products. And I would say it's way bigger than Facebook because it's so commonplace that I know, Alexa's doing it, and almost every product you get right now, it's actually it's so much the Wild West. And I'm really personally not for regulation, those kind of things, but I just think it's gotten to the point where so many people are doing it. It's so commonplace, and data is just being collected. Who knows how it's stored all over the place, to where it's kind of a little out of control. And that's why there's this backlash. I think ultimately underneath it, I don't know if it's intentional, but I do think it's dishonest when people don't realize what they're giving away. Have you guys watched The Social Dilemma?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's kind of cheesy, but I think it's really profound in some ways. But the interesting thing about it is anyone who's not in advertising and marketing is not aware of a lot of those things. They're not aware of how that works. And so it's driven awareness up. So I was having a conversation with someone I know who's not in this world, and he was like, I watched that, and can you believe that when it's free, you're the product? I was like, yeah, that's like, I've known that for 10 years. But people don't realize that. That's the scary thing.
Remember when Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know which senator, but the senator quizzed him during the hearings, and he's like, how does Facebook make money? And Mark Zuckerberg pulled slightly up to the mic and said, we sell ads. And I'm like, man, so clueless.
Not I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that just from an observer, I don't know Mark Zuckerberg personally, and I cannot make a judgment on his management style. But I would say it appears, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, that you had a young guy in college, barely out of high school, who's been at the helm of one thing and has never left it, and is making the final decisions as the head of this company. Are we starting to feel the pains of that? And maybe it's time for him to step aside and for people to rethink Facebook as an entity and as a business model, and if they're going to survive and go on. Can he do that? Is his point.
You know what happened when they got rid of Steve Jobs, don't you? What happened to Apple?
Yes, but I would
might not be as bad of a
we would argue that it was probably a necessary evolution in the company that needed to happen. Came back, but Steve Jobs has not been the sole guy behind it. He was a strong personality and drove the creativity. But Tim Cook's been there a long time.
Yeah, very long.
In the early days, you had Woz. He's always had people around him who were rock stars that helped make the company where it's with. I don't know. Yeah. You can't think of another person inside of Facebook to go, oh yeah, he's got this guy.
What's her name? Sandberg?
Yeah, Sandberg.
Yeah, she's still there, right?
Yeah.
So she's the one that actually has made them.
That's true.
To be honest with you, I think she's the Tim Cook. Tim Cook made Apple profitable because of the just-in-time shipping from China, the products to the United States, all the things he did in the manufacturing side of things. And I think she's the one that's monetizing Facebook and has grown it to the point where it is now.
I think what you're saying is interesting here because also, like you take the Apple analogy, right? Like there was that point where Steve Jobs did leave. He got kicked out by the board, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of tried to get more corporate and more structured and less, startup-like or whatever. And while it hurt Apple in the short term, it helped them. It's probably why they are where they are right now to some degree, because if one guy was just kind of like coming in and doing shot calls every day, like you might create a great product, and they did, but it tends to be really hard to scale that and be consistent. And we see that all the time. We work with, I know you guys, it's kind of indicative of a founder or an entrepreneur, like starting something. He has a passion for it, or she has a passion for it. It's a great product. People love it. And they can only take that to a certain point. At a certain point, they need someone to step in to systemize the thing. If we're going to be consistent and serve a lot of people, we see that all the time. And that transition is not always easy, but it is a specific transition. It's a different skill set. Starting something and scaling something is a different skill set. And it leaves the world of pet project and goes into the world of, a consistent, scalable business. I think what's interesting about what you said, Bob, is just in my opinion, with Facebook, it still feels like a bit of a pet project. I don't know if it is or not.
It's still using the same technology
for
the most part.
We know as marketers, like I go into the platform, here and there, and like stuff just changes. Like there's no customer service. Like, sometimes, for the longest time, and I know we're in technical world, but like for the longest time, like certain areas of business management just didn't work. Like they were just straight up broken, but no one cared. This was like years ago. And it still kind of feels like that. It just changes overnight. Like there's no real, I'm not saying.
Telling you it's a bunch of college kids hanging out, having fun.
I do think it has those indications, it seems like.
But that comes from leadership.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Well, they're growing up a little bit though. They're in their 30s. So
yeah.
They have kids and responsibilities.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if, it's outgrown itself. And
That's
now you've got maybe really less, maybe more naive leadership. I don't even know what you call it. I'm not calling Mark Zuckerberg naive, but you have that mentality, and it's serving a global population and has a lot of responsibility. And now it's getting a lot of governmental pressure for responsibility, and you might not have a mature structure. Like, the business structure just may not be mature. And that might be part of what we're feeling.
Do you think, I'm a little surprised that Facebook hasn't pivoted to something else that we were like, well, we never knew that Facebook would even get into that. They probably do. They probably have, and maybe we just don't hear much about it. Maybe they're exploring things. But I'm wondering, what Facebook will be next, because I just don't see this run happening too much longer. There's going to be such a shift in the next 2 or 3 years with technologies. And, I think companies like Twitter, is going to be here for a lot longer than we think. I think Twitter is kind of this another sleeping giant. I believe that has proven itself and stayed its course. And I think they might do some interesting things.
It's interesting. Twitter kind of stayed in its lane and has never really tried to be anything more than it was.
Yes.
Like, they added ads, but beyond that, it's like, let's play with a number of characters. Let's do that. But up beyond that, it's like, here's our lane. Here's what we are. Like it or leave it. This is what we do. And I think that is a different beast altogether.
Yeah.
I just think from Facebook, you go from, and again, I don't know Mark. I'm sure he's a great guy.
Well, if you knew him, you'd call him Zuck.
Yeah, exactly. He goes from a college dorm room, literally, to basically growing the same thing. Imagine college dorm room kid. I don't even know if he finished college, but then all of a sudden you're making worldwide decisions on the future of free countries based on people breaking in and influencing elections of the biggest countries in the world. Like, to me, does that not seem odd to you guys?
It seems like you could easily be ill prepared for that. And I actually feel bad for it because I don't envy it.
Right.
It's
a weird thing.
Well, also, these cats are making moral decisions for us.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about that, but I do want to get into that. Like, so bridge into that area. Like, part of the issue here is the degradation of the mental health.
Yes.
Because of these platforms.
Yes.
And that's irrefutable. And again, and as I would like to ask, maybe we can also discuss as advertisers, what's the moral obligation that you have towards that? Like, are you adding to that because you're spending money on it?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but there's that aspect of it, right? Which is, now there's this person who, may not have been, like, there's not a lot of experience in life. And again, I don't think it's all one person's fault or anything like that. But I think that it's a lot of responsibility. And this thing has kind of gotten out of hand now. the mental health, it's unfortunate that we're looking back and saying, man, like this is bad, because we have people addicted to social media, like to where they're actually addicted to a drug. And it is a drug, right? Like the responses it creates in your body, it does those things. We never realized that, so kind of walked blindly into it as a culture. And now we're looking back being like, how do we unwind this a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, as you guys, I've never told this on the podcast, but I'm working on it. I'll be done in September, a master's degree in behavioral and organizational psychology. My master's thesis that I just decided on, I even told you guys about this last week, I got approved, is media trauma, its effects on stress and burnout.
Bob, that's the hottest topic right now.
And the studies that I've been doing and looking at the studies that have existed the last few years will blow your mind on what you just said, Ken, because, we could talk multiple times on this, but going down the rabbit hole of privacy, going down the rabbit hole of, anxiety, depression, and suicide, all these things, they're all connected. And what you saw in the Social Dilemma, like you said, the problem that I had with that show, with that documentary, is not the information. It's the way it was presented, meaning it's a little smug to have all these executives who made all this money to come out and go, oh yeah, it was terrible. Right. After they've cashed out and made money on it, sitting there going, yeah, I really regret it. Yeah. I didn't hear one of them go, you know what? I'm going to give back half of all my money toward things.
The most genuine sounding guy was the main guy.
Yeah.
At the end, who spoke at the end. But I agree with you. The like button guy or whatever.
Right. And so I'll put that aside. The fact of young girls who give up unknowingly and naively their privacy, i.e., what I look like, my approval, am I pretty, my meaning in life, who approves of me in my social tribe. All of those things had an element in the past of a private group of people. She learned her self-worth from her parents and in her home, whatever it may be. And now it's out there in the public, and her getting those dopamine hits every few seconds on Instagram, whatever it may be. We are crazy as people to think that does not have long-term effect on emotional and physical developmental psychology.
Absolutely. We know it does. And it's just sad that it just keeps going without any major change. I mean, think about anyone listening. Think about, you've probably run some Facebook ads. I know we run a lot of Facebook ads, and the fact that people can comment on ads alone, like we get good comments, we get really mean comments. And honestly, it hurts me. Sure. Like I read it, I'm like, ouch. And it's like some random dork,
super dork,
in his mom's basement, commenting, just being mean, and he's probably hurt and he's just being bullied. But like the interesting thing about it is, if that hurts me, and I'm a grown person who actually doesn't spend any time on any social media personally, just only professionally, and it's an ad.
Yeah.
Like how much more does it hurt a
if you
young
know the person? If you actually know the person, and
right.
I mean, that's the way it was with adults in this political
whether
season,
or not you even know them, but like a young person that's in their formative years that doesn't have any confidence, that, is now not only getting hate, or validation from people that they know, but random people can come on and just throw stones. And, we know that words hurt more than anything else.
Sure.
Which is crazy. The sticks and stones will break. That's not true. Words, okay. So, I mean, the tongue and its effect on what it can do as far as damage. If you're a faith person, you read in the Bible, like that is the most damaging organ, and it's the only thing on social media that's coming across, right? It's only that, and so it is just killing people. And And it's sad. I mean, what if back in the day when you ran an ad on TV or you put up a billboard, any person
Somebody
could
came
comment.
and spray painted
Anyone
on the
could comment on it.
spray paint on the billboard.
Yeah.
You suck.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. Or start throwing, like, it's just, that would never exist. Yet it exists today, and it exists even at a deeper level because it's happening where people, for free, and unknowingly to
the sad thing is our culture is across the board is stimulating that. Again, going back to the political season where you have adults who should be adults actually doing that to people they know on social media. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and so it's like,
well, it's perpetuating itself.
Yes, and so if that can be done on any level where a mature person would still, you see that still, then the young people, there's no accountability. They can just throw stones all day long, and sometimes just even throwing stones is fun. Like that's what they're doing, right? Yeah. They're having fun, and they're just cutting you down, and but you're not taking that as a joke.
And there's also an element too of imagine, and this is an extreme example, but I think it's a valid one to explain how this is happening in society. Is that, let's say you're a 14-year-old kid, you're on TikTok or on some other platform, and somehow you get a hold of ISIS beheadings, right?
Mm.
And you're 14, you're curious, and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's traumatizing.
Oh, big time, yeah.
To 99% of human beings who witness that. He's sitting there traumatized, not even knowing he's traumatized. And of course, he can't sleep at night. He's freaked out. He has that replaying in his brain all the time. He goes to a sleepover, and, when we're traumatized like that, we want to be validated. And they're like, he says, have you guys seen this? You got to watch it. Because he wants to, other people, he doesn't want to be alone in this. And he doesn't even know what he's going through, but he knows he doesn't want to be alone. They all watch it. And there's something in psychology called vicarious trauma or societal trauma that says, just by being around and engaging with someone who has been traumatized, it can also affect you. People in healthcare situations and counselors have to deal with this, right? I think as a society, that's what social media can do. I mean, if you think of January 6th here in America, people, as we watched that, I knew so many people, myself included, that for, that week after, 2 weeks, like, I'm just sad. I'm just like, I was, some people like, I cried. People like, I got mad. I got angry. I'm just really sad. That is a shared societal trauma that obviously that was not the fault of social media necessarily, but we live in a society where, 100 years ago, all you knew was what went on in your town. All you knew is what went on in your family. And by the time it got to you, it was word of mouth or you read it in a newspaper, but we're witnessing these things real time, and our kids are going through these things real time. And I think what we need to do is look at is it's not going away. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying rethinking those algorithms, the privacy issues, the way that it's put out there, so that we can have a better ethical way of engaging with those things, because it's catching up to us. I mean, like you said, Brad, what's sad is it's fun to go do it online, but now people are taking it and their personalities are changing, and they're acting the same way in real life. And that's what's really sad. It's like, if it was just a online thing.
You mean when someone's bullying online?
Yeah. Now they're bullying in real life.
Someone might think, okay, this, there's no effect here or whatever. It's easy to do.
I can't tell you how many people that I know personally. I could probably name 5 different people that have said, I don't have a relationship with my mother and father anymore, or my mother-in-law anymore, because they've watched these videos and they've been radicalized. And it's all spectrums. So it doesn't matter where you are in the political spectrum, but they've been radicalized and they won't even talk to me anymore. I can't have a conversation because they're always telling, don't get your kids vaccinated, or don't vote for Trump, or, whatever it may be. They've become radicalized, and it's really sad to know that it can change people's personalities.
Remember back when the internet started, and there was this kind of phrase going around. It was kind of sarcastic. It was like, you can't believe everything you read online.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in college, it was like I couldn't even use, and it wasn't even that long ago, but I couldn't even use the internet to cite resources in papers.
I know.
It wasn't
legit.
verifiable and
I
legit.
know. Now it's all.
Yet now, where we have more technology to create stuff that may or may not be true, everyone believes everything they read.
You might be too old for this, but do you remember the movie So I Married an Axe Murderer? It was Mike Myers.
Yeah.
So Mike Myers' mom in there, she used to read the Inquirer every day. And Mike Myers she'd be in the kitchen. Mike Myers' character came in and said, "Mom, what are you doing reading the Inquirer?" She's like, that's all fake, right? And she's like, and she had like this, I don't know, Scottish accent or something. She's like, "No, it's all true, don't you know?" And she'd look, and she was bought into everything in that Inquirer was so true. The two-headed woman, that's true. And Mike Myers was like, "Oh man," and that's how I feel like today, world a little bit. Like
Absolutely.
You're right, they just believe it's like everybody believes it, and I do too. I get caught up in that stuff too a little bit
because it looks real.
Because it looks real, especially with deep fake and other things that are coming in the pipeline. How are we going to know truth? And you got these platforms, and that's the challenge. I think with all media these days is that all media is fictitious, every bit of it. Like, because listen, you watch Netflix. Besides, even documentaries are fictitious because they're spun with an angle, right? They might not be all the truth. And so you watch documentaries, you watch Netflix, you watch entertainment, which is fictitious, right? And then you watch media programs that are fictitious. These media companies we call news are just big marketing companies. That's all they're doing, just selling
entertainment
ads.
companies.
They're just selling ads to get your attention, and they want to perpetuate. Is that the right word?
Perpetuate.
Yeah, perpetuate their audience. They want to get their audience riled up so that they can watch more of their program, so they can sell more ads.
Same as a movie.
And it's the same place everywhere. It's the same thing with Facebook. I get text messages now from Facebook saying, "Hey, Bob Hutchins posted something." I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's find out." Like they go through every method to find out what's going to get your attention to get you right back to that platform, so they can sell you another ad. And I'm involved in that at some level.
We all are. We all are.
And that's a dilemma that I have, and that's a kind of a frustration. Is that I wish there was, something else. Like, this is where we've become.
Let me ask. No. I wanted to just maybe what you're doing. Well, two things. One, I don't know that. I don't see it getting necessarily better, and the platform is staying this way. I think that the platforms eventually are going to go away a little bit. I mean, I don't think we can. I think it seems completely unrealistic to me to be able to have an objective source of truth that actually validates through all these technologies, because there is no objective source of truth first.
Yeah.
And so figuring out the truth is going to be harder. And personally, I think that there's going to be something that makes these implode, because everything's cyclical, and it's probably going to self-destruct itself. I'm not saying, I don't know how. I just believe that everything's cyclical, and I think we're at a peak of a cycle, or we certainly are getting to the top of it. And I think that's kind of interesting and scary in some ways, and honestly, like not in, really relieving in other ways to think about. But I don't think there can be all this information and a way to validate every piece of it. It's just impossible, right?
I think that, again, this is just very far future concept, and it's probably not going to be like this at all, but it'd be interesting if, like, you could take your personal data, right? You create like with these new NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and then what you do is you lease out that data at a certain price. So if Facebook wants to advertise ads to you, you actually participate in the revenue, and then you get paid through some type of digital currency or digital exchange for every ad that you watch. Right.
Which is how kind of used to work a little bit in certain places.
Yeah.
I would take it a step further, because I'm always going to look at, the human side of it is, I think we have an obligation, and hopefully there will come a time and a day, and I know that there are people pushing toward this. Back in 2014, in Australia, in the Australian news, and it was particularly about Facebook Australia, some of the executives there it came out. It didn't really hit the U.S. press much, but you can go Google it. There's several articles. Back in 2014, they admitted to and apologized and claimed to change that they had inside of Facebook, they could tell when a teenager was feeling anxiety. They could tell a flag would come up. And what they were doing is they were telling advertisers, you can get down to this level of targeting teens, girls, boys who are feeling insecure, who are feeling anxiety, who are not feeling pretty. They could know by what they were watching, what they were clicking, how they were responding, which is sick on so many levels that they were monopolizing on that. If that's true, I hope that there will come a day, and we can all work toward and push toward this, that, like you said, Brad, participating in, but also maybe participating in mental health, meaning if somebody's watching YouTube or a Facebook video or a TikTok, there's an algorithm that says this person's going down a hole that's not healthy. And then contradict that content with more positive content.
Right.
If
Not
someone
call
is,
the police.
yes.
You know,
Yeah.
or, contradict or like balance it out.
Yeah, balance it out. Be like, if you're feeling, like you're fat, maybe there's content. Maybe the algorithm starts feeding you content about having a healthy self-image. Or if you're starting to research things about depression or suicide, there's content about counseling and mental health, and just so that instead of continuing to feed what you want, be a human and say, this person, and again, we're getting into ethical, who makes those decisions and everything, but there's got to be a way we can be better than this.
And that's why I feel like I can't see, even as you go down that path, like the decision-making process, is hard. It takes a lot of really like godly discernment, and I don't know that exists, right? And
well, there's a lot of people pushing for this. This is not a new idea.
I agree. I agree with the idea. I think that would be amazing to balance it out. I just think that ultimately, I don't know. I think these things. I hope that they that we don't degrade as a society, but I do think these things end up having to be pulled back. Big Brother is here. It's funny how some of those old school kind of predictions have come through, and in a way, I remember there were always movies about AI taking over the world. Well, it kind of has.
I mean,
and now we may have to kill it.
Elon Musk says, the AI will be the demise of our culture. He thinks it could be. Obviously, we can all see. We could all see it happening at some level, which is kind of a weird thing. But talking about like even screen time. I mean, this is years ago. Even Steve Jobs put limits on his kids on how much screen time they had, and he was the inventor of screen time.
Right.
It's like one of those things. It's like I think we just have to know that. I think everyone has to get to the point in their life, and it's harder when you're young and you're a teenager, but you have to get to a point in your life where you have self-discipline towards screens. And you have to go out and take a walk in the woods, go hug a tree, go put your arms around nature, get out. And you know how fulfilling that is, because you can actually do the opposite. Like you get to the point where you work all day on screens. You come home, you watch Netflix all night on screens.
Right.
You go to bed, you check your phone. First thing you do. What's the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up? Phone. Yeah, that's pretty addictive, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, first thing, check your phone. And it's routines. And so maybe, the challenge is like teaching and training. It is like a drug. And as like drug addict has to learn how to manage his life, or an alcoholic, we all have to maybe manage our lives a little bit better. And it's really difficult because it's such an addictive thing. And
there's a book, I think he's that I heard of. It's really interesting. It's called the Techwise Family. It sounds kind of cheesy, by Andy Crouch. But I've watched this guy speak a few times, and he'll do fast, like 2-week fasts with his whole entire family. His thing was to break the addiction of technology, not even realizing how addicted we are. And he's like, if you cut technology out of your life for 2 weeks, the first time it's going to feel like you're going to die. Like you're not. It's going to be like like addiction.
Withdrawals.
So it's withdrawals.
They call that jonesing.
So you don't have to do that, but the Techwise Family is an interesting book because it actually gives you awareness. I think step one is actually awareness, which at least is happening right now. I think people are being more aware of what they're giving away, and there's more awareness of the dangers of too much of it. But then step two is kind of self-control and discipline, which is hard. And especially, so as grown-ups, we have to maybe we don't have that already. We have to have that in a lot of areas of our life, especially in this area, because all of a sudden we realize, wow, we're playing with a very addictive drug. We didn't realize that before, but we are. And so now if you're going to be around it, especially if you're predisposed to it, it's just like alcohol or something like that. You got to treat it as, I need to have discipline with this thing because it's dangerous. And then now you take that to kids. Like kids need leaders and parents that guide them appropriately and teach them these things. And again, if you look at the phone like a glass of wine, or it's probably worse than that, but and you look at how you would treat that kind of thing. I mean, that's where, I don't know, with kids, I mean, would you hand them a bottle of wine and say, have a great time at school?
Right.
No, you wouldn't, right? Bottle of whiskey down in the South. So I don't know. I think there's awareness and there's this discipline that has to happen. And I think the good thing is that's kind of starting to happen. I mean, at least the awareness side of it.
Full circle.
I'm going to be interested to hear after you're done with your thesis some of their points and some. I know you're
I'm excited about it.
Research.
It's there's not a ton of research, but there's enough to where you're going to start hearing, I think, in the next year, because COVID is a whole nother level of societal trauma. So anyway, thanks guys. This has been good. Full circle, Facebook. Let's keep an eye on it and see what happens. Who knows?
Battle of Silicon
Probably
Valley.
not the last time we'll talk about it.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.